Today we have Chris O'Neill, Director of Faculty Development and Assistant Professor of Medicine at the David Geffen School of Medicine at UCLA. He has over 15 years of experience helping instructors implement technologies in the classroom. Thank you, Chris, for being here, and welcome. In this course, we are talking about different models of virtual education, including blended models of instruction. One blended model approach is the flipped classroom. Can you start by telling us what is the flipped classroom?
So the flipped classroom is a pedagogy, and that's important to say. A lot of people think of it as a technology, but it's not. It's a pedagogy, which is a way of teaching. And in the flipped classroom, we take the traditional classroom in which lecture and information delivery happens in the classroom from one instructor to a group of students. And we take information processing, which typically happens with one student working through homework or assignments at home, and we flip them. So a very common way to flip the classroom now is to take those lectures and record them and have the students watch them via the web, via some sort of streaming, at home, alone, on their own time, at their own speed, when they can start, stop, restart it, play it at whatever speed they like. And we take the activities, the information processing that they were doing alone, traditionally as homework or group assignment or assignments, and we bring that into the classroom, and we have students working, often in pairs or in groups, on problems that help them to understand and process the material that was in the lecture that they watched the night before via video. The great thing about the flipped classroom is that you, the instructor, are right there in the classroom, watching them work, watching them process this material, and you're able to see in real time which students are getting it and which students are not. So it's really exactly what it sounds like. You're flipping that traditional mode and bringing the processing the material into a place where you can help the students, get them working together, take advantage of that group's ability to help each other.
So would you say this is a new approach to teaching, or has this been done?
So the pedagogy, the way of teaching, is not new. We know that both teachers in the K-12 setting and the higher education setting for years now have been finding ways to introduce what's called active learning into the classroom. Students processing material, actively working on it, rather than just passively listening to the instructor talk. So that's not new. What is new is that the technology's finally caught up to the idea and the ability to easily record information, you talking, videos online, whatever that may be, and easily have students watch it online so that they're able to stream that material and, again, watch it at their own speed. That's what's new. The technology has finally caught up to the technique.
Now, can you talk a little bit about where and why the flipped classroom, as we know it now, was created?
Yeah, so again, that pedagogy is not new, but what is new is that a growing population of K-12 instructors, and I think the early adopters of this technique were usually science or math instructors in high schools around the US, were sort of looking at their students, seeing low performance, seeing students who were bored, tired, sleeping during class, students who weren't getting it by doing it via homework, and they said there's got to be a better way. So they started recording their lectures and having students watch those, I think usually just via YouTube, and then bringing those students back into the classroom the next day and having them work through that. So as a technique, it started at the K-12 level in sort of its modern incarnation, but that's grown. So you may have heard of the Khan Academy, which is a not-for-profit organization that produces content videos, puts them out there for instructors to use so that they don't have to worry about coming up with those lectures and that information. They have their students watch the Khan Academy videos that are relevant to that topic. Then when they come in the next day, they work through that material. And what the instructor is doing, what their value added is they're creating the activities and the interactions and the group work that's helping students process that material. So really it was a reaction to this traditional technique of lecture and then go home and work on it. Just was not delivering as well as it should have. After those K-12 students got it, or instructors got it going, the Khan Academy came in and sort of got a media interest in this. Now it started to spread in higher education, in professional education, at our medical school. We're even looking at it. So it's become, I think, a very common and well-known technique at this point.
Great. So do you have, can you talk to us about the documented benefits of this approach? What do we gain by flipping the classroom?
So I think the jury is still out on that. We have a fair bit of evidence from the K-12 setting which suggests that students in flipped classrooms perform better than their traditionally taught peers. They have lower failure rates. They report being more engaged and interested in the material and more likely to pursue that material later on in their education. They seem to be better at working in groups, not surprisingly. We're giving them lots of practice with that in the flip setting. They seem to be better at sort of those supporting skills of critical thinking, being able to talk about the material, being able to teach others the material. So the early evidence is very positive, and that's not too surprising because we've had pretty good educational theory for years which has suggested that students taught in a more active way perform better in the long run. At the higher education setting, in the professional school setting, the amount of evidence we have is small and I would say mixed. So we see very positive results in terms of these associated skills like critical thinking and the ability to problem solve. And we can certainly show that it doesn't hurt compared to the traditional classroom. So depending on your setting, depending on the study, we see big benefits. Sometimes we see much smaller benefits. But overall, I would say the evidence is pointing towards this is the way we should be moving in terms of how we teach our students.
Thank you. So we talked about these benefits. I know there are a number of challenges. One being that maybe you have, as a teacher, you might get students in your classroom who haven't viewed the video. And I also imagine there's resistance from teachers, perhaps, to creating this content. So can you address both the challenges of not having the student view the material and also the challenges maybe from the teacher's perspective? Sure.
So, and I think you've highlighted the 2 or 3 big challenges to flipping the classroom right there. As a technique, the flipped classroom really depends on students being prepared to process that material as a group the next day. So to incentivize preparation, people have tried a variety of things. They've tried quizzes that you have to pass before coming to class online. They've tried quizzes that you do in the classroom. One of my favorite techniques is taken from an older pedagogy called team-based learning. And in team-based learning, they use the readiness assurance process, where students come into the classroom having looked at the material the night before, and they take a quiz. They first take it individually, and their score on that quiz counts towards their score for the course. But after turning in that individual quiz, they take the exact same quiz again as a small group. And they do it in a small group so that those students who didn't understand the material they were supposed to understand can be brought up to speed by their peers and are then ready to do that group processing that is so key to the flipped classroom. So there's various ways that you can incentivize preparation. But even with all that, we still have students who are less prepared than their peers coming in, and that's something that instructors struggle with the flipped classroom. You talked about teacher resistance. Most teachers who are willing to try it are trying it for a reason. They've seen the results that are less than what they were hoping for with the traditional method. What we really see with teachers is fear of the technology. And what I tell folks is that if you're not someone who's feeling tech savvy that particular semester, don't worry about it. Just have the students read the book or read something that they have to find on the web or read supplementary material. We've had, information delivery through text for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Humans are actually pretty good at it when we give them the chance to do it. If you are tech savvy, there's ways that you can do things that are a little bit fancier. Interestingly enough, one of the big problems with the flipped classroom is not teacher resistance to the technique, it's student resistance to the technique. Students see it sort of violating that unspoken contract in the classroom, which is, I'm going to sit here and I won't bother you if you stand up there and talk and don't bother me. And the flipped classroom turns that on its head. So we hear students complaining about, he or she made me do all the work in this class. And I love to see those comments because that's exactly what we want students to be saying. But they can be unhappy about it. So if you're an instructor who's going to try flipping your classroom, I recommend talking with your principal or talking with your department chair ahead of time saying, I'm going to be trying this technique. There may be some student angst and unhappiness for a little while as we get used to it, and sort of cover your bases there, because students can find it a little bit of a jarring transition.
Interesting, because I was also thinking from the teacher's perspective, they can also create videos and use them across a number of classes. So, but you mentioned that it's the student resistance that sometimes is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, so teachers are able to reuse that material, and when teachers are worried about the time commitment involved in creating these lectures, I try to remind them there is a big initial time commitment. This is going to eat up a lot of your summer probably, but you've got them there ready to go for a few years at least. And so when we look at the actual study, sort of looking at the time involved, it actually seems to be fairly even. Yes, it's a big early investment, but once you've got them going, you can keep them for a while. And what I tell people at the K-12 level especially is, hey, if you're one of 2 or 3 chemistry instructors at your school, share those videos. You don't all have to come up with the same discussion of isomers. You know, you can sort of share that material, and students can benefit from it.
Great, thank you. And you actually are answering part of my last question, which is, what are some of the tips for educators? So you just mentioned sharing that responsibility of creating videos, or divvying up that work. Can you talk about any other tips that educators, especially educators who are maybe just starting out, just trying out some new techniques?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing I tell folks is start slow. So if you're worried about how the flipped classroom will go over with both you and your students, you don't have to flip an entire semester's worth of class. Tell students we're going to try this out 2 or 3 times this semester, and then I'm going to collect your feedback and see how it went and try to work from there. The other thing is that flipping is really best done in the context of some support. If your school has an instructional designer or an instructional technologist, maybe even the librarian who may know more about technology than you do, enlist their help. Try to make this a group process. The more students are seeing this technique in different classrooms, the less resistant to it they will be. And really, it is something which I find challenging to do on your own. So find a flipping buddy, someone who's going to help you flip their class while you're flipping your class. Get the principal involved. Try to build up some community around this. Look online. There's organizations like the flippedlearningnetwork.org, which provides support for instructors who are thinking about flipping their classrooms. There's lots of materials already out there. Look at the Khan Academy videos. Don't think that you've got to come up with everything new. From there, again, implement slowly and start to ramp up and modify the technique for what works for you.
Thank you so much for coming in today. It was a great chat.
Thank you for having me.